can support the Nigerian political system so that we can look out for good candidates irrespective of the political party they belong to. And so that was where the idea of, trying to have a diaspora alliance for good governance, which cuts across different political parties. We're saying that when we identify any candidate from any political party, like what they do in America, political PAC system, that we should be able to support such individuals through fundraising, through media support and the rest of them. And so we realize that, like I said, a couple of parties showed up. And one of the key outcome from that meeting was the insistence on diaspora, like I mentioned, having been contributing largely to Nigeria. We also have a voice in Nigeria politically. So we're looking at a situation where we can have either a political representative where we're going to facilitate diaspora voting right. Out of the so many parties in Nigeria then, think about 70 parties or so that were registered, or if I'm not mistaken, one party, African Democratic Congress, stands out. They gave their pledge to, in the history of Nigeria, create the 7 geopolitical zone. Nigeria, have about 6 geopolitical zones, but they created the diaspora as the 7 geopolitical zone. And also not only by mere creation, but also enshrined that in their constitution. It means that any member of the ADC from diaspora can participate in the primaries of the political party. And of course, if you're now coming down to Nigeria, it becomes much easier than all the roadblocks you see from the political party. Now, what is the added value from such arrangement? Such arrangement is that you see Nigerians in diaspora who do not necessarily need to go through all the hurdles the political party try to put in your way, just because they want to join them and then run for an office, because you're already a member. You're already a financial member. You can also, decide, in the activities of the party. Members of the diaspora are automatically represented in some of the organs, including at the Board of Trustee level of African Democratic Congress. And moreover, they also believe in the policy of 35%, which has a 35% for youths, 35% for women, 5% to 7% for people with disability. And of course, like I said, they created the diaspora's 7 geopolitical zone. And when you look at all these structures, this is the first political party in the history of Nigeria that have targeted the diaspora with such an initiative. Excuse me. So I believe that by so doing, we have the opportunity to also influence decision positively in the party. And I can tell you, we did a couple of that. In the last political dispensation, 2023, we believe that money bags should not overplay the prominent role in political party, and that any youth, any Nigerian, especially a youth, that has the capacity and capability to run for a political office must not be restricted on the ground of a lack of finance, especially to buy these exorbitant forms. And so we pushed for that white paper where we adopted what we call the Spartan program for African Democratic Congress in 2023, which means if you're under 40, in Nigeria during that specific time, you have to get your nomination form free of charge. If you are a female, irrespective of your age, you have your form free of charge. If you're a person with disability in Nigeria, PWD, you have your form free of charge. So these are the few innovations we introduced into the party that added value to the party. And I stand to be corrected, but I tell people every day that the issue that generated a very, very strong youth movement started from ADC. Because when we produced one of our aspirants then, the person of Kingsley Moghalu, who was a former deputy CBN governor, he had a lot of youth followers. And then they rallied around him that started, a movement that most people will assume is called the Obedient Movement today. And so they started that movement, and then it was very, very intensive. But unfortunately, he did not make it through the primaries for some obvious reasons. Some of them also being the negligence of the party, to do some certain, due consultation and due process. So at the end of the day, a lot of people were disappointed, and they migrated, unfortunately, to the Labour Party, and then the rest is history. So, but I believe that these are the values and ideals we're thinking of bringing into the political space in Nigeria, and then giving them enough opportunity that we hope that we're going to, add one or two value to that. Thank you, Honorable Kenneth.
For the benefit of those who are tuning in, watching us, who are not from Nigeria or who do not reside in Nigeria at the moment, and who are wondering what's Delta State Delta State happens to be one of the, I think one of the 6 or 5 states, and the South, right? The
That's
South
correct.
was 6 states. So there are 6 states in the South, Bayelsa, Delta, Edo, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, and there's one more. So we have Bayelsa, Edo, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Delta, and so it's 5 states. And Bayelsa, right?
Yes, I think Delta State, of course, if you look at the dichotomy that is going on between the South and the Southeast, where Anioma State is supposed to be created and under the Southeast, because they felt that the other regions have 60 states, and the South it has 5 states. So they are thinking that with the creation of Anioma under Southeast is going to balance up the equation of 6-6. But again, these are all political talks. We're not there yet.
We're going to come to diaspora votes in a second, well, down the road. So the creation of Anyama State by Senator Ned Nwoko, right? The idea, the initiative, the proposers, it's now in the National Assembly. The goal that the Anyama State, when created, would be added to the Southeast or would remain with South-South?
The idea is that it's going to be added to the Southeast.
South.
I mean, for certain political convenience, that is actually the proposal. And I also want to chip in that the Anioma State is not the creation of Senator Ned Nwoko. Anioma State creation has been quite a long initiative going back to years back. So I think he just took it up again and then try to push it further to a new frontier. So
he's just a sponsor of that bill.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. So that's where Delta State from. Delta State is a state in the South region, in Nigeria, which is located in Africa. Nigeria is a country in Africa. Needed to throw that out there. We do know you are a force to reckon with in Delta State. Do you mind sharing with us some of the pressing issues that are currently facing Delta State?
Yes, I think let's get down to probably some of the basics. Delta State, as you rightly located, as you rightly clarified in South of Federal Republic of Nigeria, one of the states in Nigeria, is also suffering from most of the states in Nigeria. We have the issue of the insecurity, where our parents, our brothers can no longer go safely to the market or to the farm, and then without being adopted with banditry. We have the issue of good governance. We have the issue of accountability, the issue of corruption. I posted a few things ago on social media. Our last budget was about 1.7 trillion. We've been one of the oil producing states in Nigeria, and I said 1.7 trillion for 2026 budget should translate to positive effects on the ground. I am not saying that on the ground. I'm thinking that I'm not saying that the people who are currently in charge are not doing their best, but I think we're doing far below our potential as a state. And so again, when we have such big budget, there should be a very big initiative that one can see. I mean, we're looking at youth unemployment, which is almost over 30% in Delta State. We're looking at unemployment generally. Our hospitals cannot be classified as a best of the best in Nigeria, not even in the region. Our roads are fairly compared to other states in Nigeria. So when you look at the amount of budget and the amount of trillion we're having for our budget, we expect that such facilities and amenities in Delta State. We're expecting Delta State to be a mini Dubai in Nigeria. And so if you look at the Dubai, the population, the landmass, their resources compared to what they are today, compared to what Delta State is, you will agree with me that we're operating far below our potentials. So these are the issues that we think that we are going to run upon given the opportunities. There's going to be more accountability. There's going to be blockages of leakages. Big projects should reflect big projects. Youth employment shouldn't be an issue we cannot tackle. Yeah. Delta State is blessed with so many mineral resources. We have the very, very robust youth population that are enlightened. We are in the IT world today. And then in sports, our people has been one of the best in the time ago. And then if you look at all these indices that will amount to the development of a particular state, you can be sure that the Delta State is far lacking behind. If you look at I think apart from Lagos State, if you take out the budget of three other states, including probably Lagos and Rivers are probably exception. If you put out the other three states allocation for Delta State account for about three allocation of a state. Three states in Nigeria is equivalent to one allocation in Delta State. And so with that, we're expecting to perform like, three states, which means we have to perform three times better than most states in Nigeria. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that now. These are the issues I think we need to address, given the opportunity.
So, with your party solidly on ground in Delta State ADC, and should your party emerge victorious in the general election and hopefully win a couple of seats, or hopefully win the governorship election there in Delta State, how do you think the entire ADC in Delta State, what's your take as to how they can help with local and foreign investment pouring into Delta State? What do you think your party would do differently compared to what's on ground right now in Delta State?
Well, I think I've like I said, we hosted a couple of trade mission as a leader of the diaspora. I've just mentioned some of the potentials. Delta State have a war report, one of the very, very prominent ports in the past. We have gas in Warri area. We have the Delta Glass Company. We have in a Kwale area where they are transmitting power. And so these are the critical infrastructures we need to focus on. If we build up our energy sector, and again, most people will agree with me, including you, that give Nigeria 24/7 energy, and they will explode in terms of initiatives, in terms of businesses and the rest of them. And so we will focus on power generation, which is one of the critical infrastructures we have, because we have the resources, we have the gas. We have the gas, we have the oil. So Delta State, like I mentioned before, Delta States, we are performing far below our capacity with the amount of natural resources like the oil and gas we have. Delta State should be able to buy. So I will make sure that I add to my voice that we're going to work out, especially the port, the power sector, the gas sector, because once you work on these infrastructures, especially you block all the leakages, you create employment for the youth. And when you create employment for the youth, you bubble the economy, people are able to pay their taxes. And with their taxes, government is able to maintain these infrastructures. The road network will become, almost an A1 trunk road. We have the rural electricity. Now, even in areas where we don't have a gas coverage, but with the resources we can generate from both these critical infrastructures like the port, the energy, and the gas sector, we'll be able to extend the renewable energy back in the rural areas. Where we can set up solar farms to be able to reach out to that. Secondly, Delta State is one of the most fertile state in Nigeria. We have a very, very great arable land, and agriculture, like we know, if you work on the agriculture, you feed the nation, you feed the state. The farmers should be able to go to their farm without fear of being kidnapped, and also we're able to to encourage farmers. I ran in 2023 with what I called a Bandit for Life initiative, where we believe that we'll set up a commercial or community farm in the 9 local government area of the Delta North, which I was covering then. And it is simple. We are partnering with the Green for Life initiative, JLI, from Germany, Portugal, and the Netherlands, where we're going to invest in these 9 farms in these farm regions, and these are going to be co-owned by the locals. And then we provide them with genetically modified, seeds. We provide them with machineries. We provide them with consultation and also open up market access to market for them, where we create a market that can buy up most of this product at a very fair price to make sure that they have enough money in their pocket. So when you look at these issues combined, we look at the critical infrastructures, we look at the youth development, youth employment, we look at the agriculture, and of course with this money generated, we can focus on our healthcare system, because a healthy person is also a more productive person. We look at the youth, we look at the sports. I'm currently in Nigeria on a diaspora youth outreach, which is basically non-political, where we brought in like the Nigerian ex-nationals like Andrew Uwe, who captained Nigeria to Russia, the Flying Eagles, and they won gold. We brought in people like Ambrose Ojod, who are currently in Nigeria with me, and then of course we brought in some experienced German scouters, and so we go and we do community tournaments where we can have a pathway for our youth that can open up a career for them, or career opportunities in Europe. So these are the basic things I think the government should be doing. And at least I'm not expecting the government to do also all the things that individuals also should do, but the government should provide the necessary enabling environment. If I'm coming in with our German friends and I have to, pay through my teeth to have to take care of their security, then of course you reduces the resources that we have to do other things. And apart from that, most of them will not even like to come because of the fear of security. And so we need the government to provide also the enabling environment. And I think ADC government will make sure of that, including, of course, what you say you're going to discuss later, the diaspora voting right. That we need to to create the opportunity that diaspora should come to Nigeria and participate. And by so doing, when the conversation is numerous and qualitative, the quality of discussion and the possible positive outcome is guaranteed. And I think we have diasporans who are look at all the human capitals we have in Nigeria. Is it from NASA to BMW to Mercedes-Benz, to airport management across these are all Nigerians doing fantastically well. Why is it difficult for Nigerian government to make environment for these people to come back home? Obasanjo started it. That's what led to Nigerians in diaspora organization, NIDO. And you look at the people like Adesina of FDB, African Development Bank. Look at Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Look at all these great diaspora that came back home, to help Obasanjo's government, rejig the cost of the Nigerian economy. And you can compare the results from Damas and what we have today. So this is the role that diaspora can play, and I think my party will be in the forefront to make sure that we bring back the past glory of Nigeria to where it is before.
Thank you, Honorable Kenneth. You touched a little bit on agriculture, a little bit on unemployment, a little bit of infrastructure. You spoke more about the problem, the issues. I would love for you to speak more specifically about the how, taking into consideration that a vast majority of Nigerian youths who are unemployed are looking for a quick fix, get rich kind of a thing. And you speaking of agriculture, even farmers, the farmers in Delta State, how is ADC in Delta State going to make that happen? How do you think it should go? How are you going to bring in the youth population in Delta State who are not interested in agriculture to fall in love with agriculture, that would help with the infrastructure and help with the economy in Delta State? How is that going to play out? The how. Can you please help us elaborate more about the how?
Yes, of course, like you agree that in such a program, it's very difficult to to exhaust all the hows in one section. But I will take a couple of examples. By the grace of God, I was a consultant to the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs on migration. We have Nigerians, traveling through the Libya, and a lot of them through the Red Sea. I think almost a sizable percentage of those people who lost their life through the desert are Nigerians, and also through the Red Sea. So we're able to approach the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Germany to bring out a concept, what we call the, awareness on the dangers of unplanned migration. What we found out is that we partner with some institutions in Nigeria. A typical Japanese or Chinese, will come to Nigeria through their Exim Bank or Development Bank, probably with about 10,000 you know, as a startup girl, startup money. Sorry, I missed my German and English sometimes. And so they come to Nigeria with 10,000. If you go to most of the states, I think in the West, they will tell that most of the biggest tomato farms there are Chinese. And these are the Chinese that came to Nigeria with about $10,000. On the contrary, a Nigerian, not all Nigerians, sorry, so I don't fall into the fallacy of a generalization. Some Nigerians will sell their father's land, will sell their father's properties and houses for over the same 10 million to travel down out of this country to go and seek greener pasture. And sometimes most of them don't even succeed. They get even, unfortunately, you know, something happened to them along the line, or even they get to the final destination and they get deported. So there's this missing link. One of the hows is that to see that Nigerian part of education has been, you know, I mean, most educationists has also debated that it's more theoretical than practical. So what we are doing in this is we are telling the German government, you can't stop, you know, people who are determined to leave a country because of different economic activities. So let us have a program where we can open up the potentials. Let us open their eyes to see the potentials surrounding them. Why a Chinese can come to Nigeria with 10,000 and start a tomato farming, and become one of the biggest commercial farmer in Nigeria. Why his Nigerian counterpart is selling their properties the same amount to travel out. And so we begin to look at the potentials at home. And I told you one of those hows, for instance, is also that we put in, you know, in the nine local government area that makes up the Delta North, a commercial farm in each of these area. Now we come up with a commercial farm, not the local farm you're looking at. I'm telling you about, you know, having a mixed breed of a you know, product where you can, for instance, corn or tomato cycle, rather than having it in 2 cycles in a year. Because of the form of the hybrid, you can have it into 3, 4, 5 cycles in a year. You look at the vegetable, look at the greenhouse agriculture and the rest of them, and you have these commercial areas in a designated area where you have the youths go through this training, and at the end of the day, the youth will sit down in their house like both of us are sitting now, chilling down with whatever drinks they want to chill out with, while using the drone and the IT to monitor their farms. They can check the acidity of the soil. They can monitor. These are the when you do that, it's called that going to farm. You don't need to be a farmer and stay in a farm 24/7 to be able to to contribute to the society. When you begin to open up these modern techniques of farming, and they also realize that at the end of the day that there's some board, some agency that will come and pick up those products for them and actually see their hand is shaking from a lot because the product has been sold. So when you begin to do that, you encourage them. You encourage the youth, not to go into you can't stop all of them, but not to go into a quick fix. The second house, for instance, as I speak to you, I am developing a diaspora estate in Nigeria, in Asaba Delta State. We are looking at a 500, housing unit. What we want, how do we encourage youth to do that? We were trying to partner with the German Center for Smart Cities, and we are trying to have what do we call a center in Delta State, in addition to in cooperation with the Delta State in Salinas University. The idea is that, again, that fall in line with the kind of education we have. Germany is a country that is believe in a dual educational system. You can go through the university or you can go through the technical parts, and at the end of the day, you arrive at the same destination. We can have this our partners from Germany coming to train these youths. If you ask any Nigerian who is building a house, the way you want to get the best of the tiles, they travel to Benin or Cotonou to go and get all these tilers to do that. We could do that. We could do better. I see people coming to work in my house. I see they want to open up a hole in the wall. They use chisel and hammer. I say you're really destroying the world. All you need to do is to have your normal driver and hand drills, and with the right instrument, you can drill a hole. Minutes you're through, and the rest of them. So when we bring in our partners and we train we retrain this youth. Once we train this youth, we deploy them to this diaspora housing estate, where we can create automatically a job. Create a job for this youth. And moreover, we can also using also and kind of agencies that when we retrain these youth and then deploy them in this diaspora city, we can also subcontract these youth also to other housing facilities who have seen the standard and the quality of what these youth can do because they have been trained and retrained. So these are the issues. These are the hows one can can get into that. Now, I'm working with some of the professors in Germany, especially Professor Ayo, I've forgotten the second name, where we are looking about seaweed farming. Seaweed farming, because of the Delta is a riverine area, they can have a commercial seaweed farming that at the end of the day produces fertilizers, produces ethanol, for electricity and so many other byproducts. And these are the high-tech farming that most of our youth were gladly involved in because they believe it's a high-tech, farming that you don't need to, go to the farm and break your back, to do. So there are so many hows. There are so many hows we can do that in the areas of agriculture, in areas of redevelopment. For instance, also we have an initiative, what we call the Green Initiative, the Green Energy Initiative, where you have our partners from Germany and also European countries, to train youth on renewable on smart cities. And in training them on smart cities and renewable energy, we give them the opportunity to assemble their solar panel and the battery themselves. So at the end of the day, we could, with the support of the initiative, at the end of your graduation, this youth will go out with a complete unit set of these solar panels, and you probably put in 1 or 2 chips there just to motivate them to say, okay, you don't have money, we're giving you this for a deposit of 5,000. You keep paying through the unit because you have to recharge the unit. Once you complete the unit, it becomes yours. Then you can go and use it and do whatever you have. So you do that, you see youth coming out of the village to have a barbering salon. All they need is a panel, is a solar light to have a barbering salon. Well, we're not supporting I'm not going to the Akara format of empowerment, but at least people can set up solar businesses and see what they can use a solar business to do without relying on the so these are the hows. Like I said, I just give you a couple of examples of the how. Of course, if you have any other areas, we can also dig into details, but I just give you example of the agriculture, for instance, and also the youth on renewable energy in terms of training and retraining of our artisans. And these are the things that I think is possible under AGC government.
Thank you. It's funny you mentioned the Akara, which kind of just brings my attention to state police. What's your take, or would I say what's your political party's take there in Delta State regarding the state police? How are they seeing it? What's the feel like?
It has been an issue that has been reoccurring within Nigeria and also within my party. Honestly speaking, I cannot venture into the position of my party on that because I'm not the spokesperson for the party. But personally, I've campaigned on the issue of the state police, and I totally agree with the state police. Although one begin to go into the nitty-gritties of that, and you begin to to be scared if we have if we have reached the states where we can implement the state police without any issue. Why have I advocated for state police? I'll give you an example. I believe that part of the security architecture we have in Nigeria has not been very helpful with over centralization, whether it's politically in Abuja or the police in I give you an example that you can't bring in a commissioner of police from Kano or from Sokoto, Delta State. What does he know about Delta State? The hotspots and the rest of them. Of course, because the way the police are trained, they obey the last order, and so they don't have the capacity to probably query their boss. I'll give you a very good example of what I mean. I remember that sometimes I think that around that 2023, I'm not quite sure in case I mixed up the date, where we have an issue in Magodo. And so I think it was Governor Showolu, if I'm not mistaken, went to settle the issue in Magodo. And he came there and he saw that there are some the detachment of police officers who were in that Magodo estate. And so he was surprised to see a detachment of police there. And of course, he did not know about that. So he queried who deployed you. He said that they were deployed from Abuja. And he asked them, okay, now I'm the governor, I'm taking charge, step out. And they said, sir, with due respect, we're not going to move an inch. We don't take order from you, we take order from Abuja. And so you ask yourself, the governor of Lagos State, like every other governor, is the chief security officer of that state. And yet, he cannot give an instruction to a police unit to vacate where they are deploying. So these are the issues that I believe, support state police. That a governor of a city or of a state should be responsible for the security in his domain. And in that case, he should have the force, to implement, to exercise that right. But again, the argument against that is, look at local government. We have a series of court cases where they are they are supposed to be independent from the governor, and where they have their financial allocation and they have their autonomy to some extent. But you see that up to today, very, very few states are allowing that to happen, and that they make sure they control the allocation of the LGAs, which means that you can only be in the good book of the governor if you do his bidding. And so that true independence is not there. Another example that supports those who are fearing the state police is that in most of the states, the state electoral commission conduct the election for the local government area. There's apart from one or two states in the north, there's no LGA that has produced councillors and chairmen by the ruling party. It's because the ruling party decides who becomes the chairman and who becomes the councillor. As petty as it is, the councillor of a community, they want to produce, the ruling party wants to produce that. So if they cannot manage this, this autonomy of the separation of power between the local government area and the state, in the petty issues like the councillorship and the chairmanship, how much more state police? So these are the issues that we need to look at critically to be sure that we are not doing something wrong. But my gut feeling says that we should have state police, because their local intelligence understands the issues on the ground, and they're able to respond faster than an individual who are posted based on command and control, a policy that does not really understand what happened in that state and does not also have any affiliation to that state. And so it's something we need to look at critically and make sure that those areas that we might think might cause the problem are addressed properly.
Thank you. Let's we're going to touch on diaspora voting in a second. I just want to make sure we don't forget about the diaspora voting section. But it's interesting to hear your take about state police. The different arguments out there as to why it should stay, why it should not come into existence, stuff like that. We'll find out about, especially with the National Assembly now, passing the bill. We'll see how that goes. We'll see. But one thing is certain: everyone seems to agree that in terms of fighting insecurity, it might do more harm for us all as Nigerians. Now, on diaspora voting, you and I have lived, or we live outside of Nigeria, and there's this culture of fellow Nigerians or fellow immigrants. There's this immigrant mentality of get what you want, make your money, make sure your family is comfortable outside those shores of Nigeria or whatever diaspora nation you're living at, and just take care of yourself. And once in a while you send money back home, but be sure to pray for Nigeria, be sure to hope to God for Nigeria, be sure to trust that another nation's president will step in and help your Nigeria. Be sure to hope that someday, somehow, someone in Nigeria will just miraculously stand up and fix Nigeria without they wanting to get involved with seeing to the betterment of Nigeria. So when we see individuals like yourself who live and reside outside the shores of Nigeria and who is passionate about Nigeria, it's very commendable, very commendable. And it's interesting, for the first time ever, I think many of us listening here are just getting to know and learn that there's probably a seventh geopolitical zone, and that's the diaspora, right? You and I can probably agree on this, that if the entire diasporans all return back to their country to cast their votes, they would make a splash. I think it's possible they'll be able to make a splash. Now, on diaspora voting, we've seen a couple of African countries that are already doing it, such as Ghana. They already have diaspora voting. Nigeria, not yet. I want you to touch more about that. Why is that the case? What could be the problem? What's going on?
Well, I think we have over 16, if I'm not mistaken, over 16 African countries that are practicing diaspora voting. But I think what is happening to Nigerian diaspora community is that Nigeria is happening to us. We're not different from the problem in Nigeria. There have been a lot of initiative for diaspora voting. The last one, if you might recall, there are less than about 30. I think there are less than about 30 House members that voted for, and the overwhelming majority voted against it. And I can tell what you hear from the back door, in as much as they might not, they will not agree with that, is that you want them to come and take over your position, because they think that most diasporan, well, I'm not saying we are perfect, but I think we are more enlightened politically, than most of our competitors in Nigeria. And then they are not feeding you, you're not hungry. So they know that they cannot give you 5,000 naira and manipulate your vote. They know that you're voting based on your, on your conscience and the rest of them. And I think that's, I think they fear that most. I had the privilege of leading a delegation of a Nigerian community, Nigerians in diaspora, of course, our community in diaspora, to have a closed door meeting with the INEC as far back as 2019, 2019. I'm not quite specific about the date now, where the INEC commissioner, retreated the fact that they are capable to conduct diaspora voting then. But what they needed is a constitutional amendment that allows electronic voting. As a matter of fact, the electronic voting you're having today in Nigeria, as a kind of electoral reforms, actually started from the diaspora. Because what we wanted was the diaspora voting, and they said that you cannot have a diaspora voting without having an amendment to have electronic voting, since we're not going to be coming down to Nigeria to vote, personally. That was actually how part of this reform that ended up having electronic voting. So electronic voting passed, but diaspora voting itself did not pass. Again, I believe that the fear of the diaspora is one of the reasons why most of legislators are not willing to push for that. On the other hand, also, I think the diaspora will have a part of the blame. I could recall that as the leader of Nigerians in diaspora then in Europe, we had a contact with some of the key legislators in Nigeria that has to influence the diaspora. And I tell them from my position in Germany, and I think from what I read about the States and the UK, when you want to get a law passed, you lobby the legislators. You lobby them, you take them out to dinner, you set up some campaign initiative where you invite them, make them comfortable and also try to. But in most cases, when you speak some of our diaspora, that we have some of these key individuals who can lobby, either in Nigeria or in diaspora. The first reaction, which I understand, I share them. These people who are collecting millions of dollars, who have virtually everything free, you want us to come up with them again? And no, we're not going to do that. They know the right thing, that they should do the right thing. Politics doesn't work that way, in my own understanding. And so we need to really, also put our house in order, understand that changes and legislators also, work lobbying, getting some critical interest groups. So which means we have those senators, these House members that voted for diaspora voting. Do we know who they are? Who are they? What is their position on diaspora voting currently? Are they major principal officers? We should be able to reach out to those individuals, lobby them, have a dinner meeting with them, have lunch with them, encourage them to let us know who and who are their colleagues that we can get into the vote, make sure that the next voting will have more than 30 and the rest of them. And so it's I think on both sides it's something we need to look into. But definitely, like I said, one of the reasons probably why Nigeria is also the way it is, economically and politically, is that they have succeeded in excluding their diaspora. If you look at India, if you look at Singapore, if you look at Israel, if you look at the Australians, they are success both politically and economically, we are tied to the influence of the diaspora. And I think if Nigeria should harness their diaspora potentials, I could see things beginning to happen. And the starting point is diaspora voting right.
Thank you, Honorable Kenneth. It seemed to me with what you just said that it's just like you probably highlighted that it's probably that trend from current elected officials, the vast majority of them, that those in the diaspora are literally probably coming over to take their jobs, get them out of office and transform the nation to what it ought to be, right? I guess the question I would ask is, for you as someone who has lived in the diaspora, who lives in the diaspora, funny enough, many of the elected officials that we have at the National Assembly, once upon a time lived in the diaspora. Truth be told, once upon a time, they walked on the streets outside of the shores of Nigeria. They saw beautiful roads. They saw a healthcare system that worked. They saw schools that worked. They saw life, how beautiful life was made for citizens in those countries. And they come back home and get elected. And it's as though they never went abroad, right? So for you as someone who seem to have the years and eyes, you seem to have a lot of followers there in Delta State. The future seemed very bright for you there in Delta State. If peradventure you get elected into whichever office you get elected into, how would you keep the people of Delta State engaged? How would you keep yourself accountable to them? How would you continually show yourself to them and not one of such political time for electioneering, and then they go missing in action for the next 3-4 years? How are you going to do that?
Thank you very much. That's a very, very valid question. They say, show me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. And they also say that the action defines priority. And most of the initiative I've taken so far, including the youth empowerment, including the sports initiative, including the agricultural initiative and the rest of them, I am doing that as a single individual. As I speak to you, I've not gotten not one single contract from any state and not from the federal. In my 30 years in Germany, I had, when I was spoken about one of my principals in ADC, I got a lot of attack from the social media and saying that I have probably collected a lot of money. That's why and I challenged everybody, both on the national TV. If there's any government, if there's any agent of government who has given me money in the past 30 years to influence my opinion, you should come out and tender that evidence, and I'll resign from politics and I'll pay that money 3 times back. It was a challenge I threw back. And so I can, look forward and say, I have do that. I've not done that, and I'm not likely going to do that. Of course, if I have a project that is a paid project, of course, I'm not going to say no to that because I believe in certain. But I'm not going to be corrupted, to such an evidence. Now, let me. I think the question is, what am I going to show different? The joy of every politician is the ability to communicate with your people. Because you have to understand, you can be in Abuja and you think you know what your people want. Because you surround yourself with people who sings only yes sir or yes ma, without telling you the truth. The only way you can find out the truth is when you go down to the to the individual, to the community. And so town hall meeting must be part of your your daily protocol to be able to reach out to your person. Again, like I said, that action define priorities. I've been in Germany for over 30 years now. My telephone number, the first telephone number I had in Germany, is the telephone number I'm still having till today, which means I have not changed it. So which means I'm accessible. In fact, if we finish this program and you go on my site or you go on Google and search me and search my company in Germany, the same telephone number you see there is the same telephone number you call me with. You can confirm that yourself and you get me on that. You will get me on that line. I have not changed it. And so when you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. It's only when you've collected money in a corrupt way and then you begin to change it. Of course, I understand the pressure of the office that everybody's trying to reach out to you. But if you are doing what you're supposed to do, you can manage that. I said in my 2023 campaign election that if I got elected, that 70 to 80% of my allowances will be channeled back into the community. And I asked them to hold me accountable for that. And so when you do that, when you run an open door policy, you become, you try as much as possible not to be like one of them. And moreover, family background matters so much. If you know where you're coming from, if you know, how your parents, brought you up, if you know the record of your siblings, you are not going to dare to tear those reputation down. And so when you have things that, in fact, if you have anything to lose in public office, then you are one of those people who can deliver better. But if you don't have anything to lose, that people don't know your certificate, you keep changing names, you have several issues to answer, and you've not criminal records here and there, and your life is so shrouded in secrecy and the rest of them. If you're not even accountable within your own personal self, within your own family circle, how are you going to be accountable to the nation? And so that's why it is important that Nigerian, we should get to the awareness to understand that election have consequences, that the people you put in office have consequences. And if we think about, what I do think, what worries me most of the times in the diaspora and also in Nigeria, like where you look at some magnificent bridges, you look at some magnificent building, and you realize that this building took about over 80 years to build, which means some of the founders of these buildings and these edifices, like the Empire State buildings and the rest of them, or like the Houston Bridge or whatever. I follow one of the documentaries on that. How many people that died? The guy who actually started it did not finish it. It's the son who end up, finishing the, because they have a force. They think beyond their generation. They think years ahead. But what we do in Nigeria is that if it's not going to happen within your 4-year legislative period, you're not going to get involved in that, because you feel that if you start it and you finish it, the glory does not get to you. And these are the mentality we need to change. And I think the diaspora need to help. The diaspora, I used to, follow with some of my friends. I call them the armchair critics. They stay in the comfort of their air-conditioned room and they will tell you what is wrong and what is right in Nigeria. And I said, come back home, join the struggle. Contribute whatever you can financially, otherwise, and to make sure that we change the system. Staying in abroad, staying in New York, in Paris, in London, in Sydney will not change them. Those politicians, they don't care about what we think. They don't. In fact, once they get in there, they block their ears. As long as they are able to. So we need both our. I'm not expecting everybody to come back from diaspora to join. But if you cannot join physically, if you cannot join with the boot on the ground, support somebody, support an initiative in Nigeria. And that is all what I need. I have to ask the diaspora, rather than endless critique of how bad Nigeria is, how corrupt the government. Of course, the government is corrupt. Of course, Nigeria is bad, but that is not a plan. I remember when we started this interview, and when I said one or two things, you said that sounds like a plan. Yeah, we should have a plan. How do we want to tackle insecurity? How do we want to tackle corruption in Nigeria? How do we want to tackle these issues so that we can be able to support those people on the ground, to make sure that they can move further from where they are, even if we are not going to be physically present for that. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Honorable Kenneth Bandy. For those who are just tuning in, we are live with Honorable Kenneth Bandy, a prominent figure there in Delta State, a state located there in Nigeria. To the armchair critic that you spoke of, I want us to touch a little bit on them, and as well as touch a little bit on Nigerians in Nigeria, the typical Nigerian voter. For you as someone who you might be classified as a Nigerian diaspora, right? Many would wonder, what the heck are you doing? Right? You have a life to yourself, you have a beautiful family, things are going well for you. What's your problem with Delta State? Why worry about Delta State? Why care so much about Delta State? Do you really think that a vast majority of the people in Delta State care so much as you do about you and your family and your loved ones. Even family members might actually say to you that, are you bothering yourself with these people? They don't care. Is it really worth it? And then the handshake critic, of course, they might also chime in here and there and say, you know what, I know XYZ who tried it XYZ years ago and XYZ failed, right? Which is quite discouraging. You hear the handshake critics say stuff like, well, let them fix their problem, or we just have to continue to pray to God. We just have to continue to trust that the world, other developed nations will come to the rescue of Nigeria, right? What do you have to say to such armchair critic that would encourage them to join in the resolve of seeking to rescue Nigeria in every state, whatever state they come from? And what do you also have to say to the Nigerian voters who are actually pushing the Nigerian diasporas away, who are coming to rescue, that we don't need your help, when truly they actually do need help? What do you say to both individuals?
Nelson Mandela once said that it always seems impossible until it happens. So I understand those critics who believe that the issue of Nigeria cannot be solved and we should allow Nigerians to fix it. But I always tell them that my love for Nigeria is stronger than my fear for my personal security. By so doing, I always tell people, you have relations in Nigeria. You have schoolmates, you have friends, you have brothers and sisters. If it's because you are comfortable and you think you don't have any issue in Nigeria, then we're missing out the point. Because by the time they finished one set of people, like what we're experiencing today in banditry, it started by, they started kidnapping farmers. When they probably were no longer farmers to kidnap because they are no longer going to farm. They started kidnapping school children. When schools are taking more precaution and probably going off boarding schools and parents are becoming more careful, they go after millionaires and business people. And even when business people are becoming very difficult to get now, they even go after generals in the military. And so you see that this is a problem that if you think because the problem is not affecting you now that you're safe, no, there's no safe place, for allowing such a issue to continue. And so yes, even during the time we are campaigning, we had about up to 9 diaspora that lost their life during the campaign. That actually came to Nigeria to participate in politics, and then they end up. But I always tell people, hey, you're from Texas in America. I believe that if you check the statistics of a crime rate in a month in Texas, it's probably more than what you have in Nigeria. Although in the last years in Nigeria, it has dramatically worsened, so to say. What am I trying to say? That we can't based on the fear of the unknown, not to engage in trying to advocate for good governance in Nigeria and make sure that we enjoy. We want to come back home, like you rightly said. We want to come back home to a community, a country where we can, go back at 12 o'clock in the night without any fear that somebody is going to rob us off or kidnap us. We want to come back to a country where we have the lights 24/7. We want to come back to a country, where people are held accountable for their action or inactions. And I believe that sometimes it takes outsider to see things inside the house because you detach yourself from all emotional involvement. So I still believe strongly that over 30 million Nigerians in the diaspora, they have what it takes to transform Nigeria. Just imagine if the 30 million in Nigeria decide to contribute just $20 each, and to say, okay, we want to support one political platform or one political individual who is a presidential candidate or one governor as an example of the power of the diaspora. I mean, $20 is something you can spend on the roadside for a burger and the rest of them. So imagine 30 million Nigerians donating 10 euro or $10 to support a political movement in Nigeria. You can understand the effect. And this is what the politicians in Nigeria are fearing. They are fearing the power of the diaspora, so they try to divide us and rule us. They try to, based on, oh, this man is an Yoruba man, it's an Igbo man, it's an Hausa man, and we have nothing to do with him, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, most of us are, are falling into that. My appeal to our diaspora friends, who I call the armchair critic. Nobody expects everybody to be interested in politics. But the funny thing is that if you allow the individuals, the idiots, if you allow them to take over the, the decision making of a country, then of course they will take an idiotic decision, and you have to live with that consequences. And so saying that politics is not for you, let them fix it. They're not going to fix it. They're not going to fix it, and at the end of the day, we all suffer for the mistakes they are doing. So I will encourage my brothers and sisters in the diaspora. We pick out a candidate from your community. Pick out a candidate, from your state, irrespective of your political affiliation. Get some of your friends from your community, from your state, to support that, candidate. Advocate for him, irrespective of the political party. Raise money for him, help with the media work and the rest of them. And then if he wins, hold him accountable. Nigerian has weaponized poverty, that with 3,000, somebody can say, oh, I mean, look at it from 2023. What do I have to lose or gain? My PVC, you want it 3,000? Abeg, give me that 3,000. No, I need it. And they will give you their PVC because they think it's worthless. We should be able to, have an initiative that encourages Nigerians who are good citizens to say, you know what, you want to go from point A to point B on election day. I will fund your transportation, but please, vote your conscience. If we begin to come up with such policies, I'm sure that a lot of those people who are using the poverty to manipulate, will begin to think twice, understanding that the 4,000 or 5,000 they take for a day, election day, is going to be what they're going to get for the next 4 years, and they should know that it's worth it.
Thank you, Honorable Kenneth. We would like for you to address this group of individuals, voters in Delta states and all across Nigeria who do not have their PVC, voters in Nigeria who actually do have their PVC but actually do not know where it's kept because they have no intention of coming out to vote, voters in Nigeria who have their PVC but they've looked at themselves in the mirror and they've said to themselves, I'm going to give my PVC, just like you said, to the highest bidder. And as well as address officials who ought to be all about busy guiding and ensuring that the sanctity of our electoral process is protected. And as well as even fellow candidates who might be running for office, who might actually be listening in, watching you live, who actually have intention to rig in elections. How do you address all these people all at the same time, such that it will lead to a better Delta state, such that it would produce only candidates who are resolved to having the very best for Delta state? How do you address all these categories of people?
I hope I will manage to combine them the way you excellently did that. But I always say one thing. People tell you your vote doesn't count, so don't bother going to vote. And I ask myself, so why are they buying your vote if it's not counting? Why do they have to pay for your PVC if it doesn't count? So the slogans, your vote doesn't count, is a deliberate effort to disenfranchise people, to let people know that don't bother voting, just go and, give out your 5,000 and the rest of them. And so I would tell them, if your vote is not counting, they wouldn't be buying it. So don't sell your vote. If you don't have your PVC, I would say one thing. I might be wrong. I'm not an expert on that. It becomes easier to rig votes if people stay away from polling stations or from voting. It becomes more difficult to rig it if people show up in numbers. And so that's why they try as much as possible to disenfranchise people, because that will give them the opportunity to rig it. So if you have your PVC, don't believe that your vote is not going to count. That's not true. And then guide your vote so that in a way that at least satisfy your conscience before God and man, that you've done your little, you can, to be able to, to change the status quo. On my fellow, politicians, the journey of 1,000 kilometers begins with a step. we might probably not get to where we're going to in 2023. Hopefully, we'll get there in 2027. But let's keep the faith. Let's keep the faith. I just gave you example of some architects in US or in Europe, constructing an air deficit that lasts over 80 years, 90 years. They basically know they are not going to probably see the end of the construction because probably they started at the age of 30, 50. So they know that they cannot last for the next 100 years to see that. But they believe they are digging out a foundation that is going to help generation to come. So let us begin to get involved to lay the necessary foundation that is going to help generation to come and the rest of them. And for the electorates, I totally agree. The election managers, I totally agree that it is time Nigerians begin to hold people accountable. And I'm happy that we have seen a couple of that across the country. I'm not advocating for violence, but when people come to steal your vote and snatch your ballot paper, we should be bold enough to stop them from doing that with whatever legal means we have. And if we have to fight to make sure that they don't take our boxes, we need to do that. Sometimes staying away out of fear of these individuals coming to snatch our ballots are what is actually encouraging them to do more, knowing that we cannot do anything more than that. Collectively, Nigeria will be better if we collectively agree to say that enough is enough. That these issues involving the political manipulation, diaspora disenfranchisement, and the rest of them has to stop. The diaspora need to begin to get involved in Nigerian political process. The elites in Nigeria, from our state, from our villages, from our councils, they have to begin to get involved in the community. In a situation, in a country, in a community where the elites sign off from politics, it is a guarantee for bad governance, and that's exactly what we're seeing in Nigeria.
Thank you, Honorable Kenneth. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up very, very soon. You just spoke more about, love for fatherland in a way that if we were to sum up what we just discussed, or what you just helped explain, it's more about how to love our fatherland, how to love our nation, right? In a different space. Wherever we find ourselves at. If there is one public servant, it doesn't have to be Nigeria, it could be somewhere else in a different part of the world that you so much admire, who would that be and why?
That's a very broad question. Do I really have any particular favorite?
Especially taking
people are
go on.
Go ahead.
Especially,
No, go ahead, sir.
Because the goal for most diasporans, I'm sure you could agree with me on this, and the goal for a vast majority of Nigerians, even in Nigeria, is that someday we would have a nation that works. Someday we would not need to tell a fellow Nigerian to do what's right before he or she does what's right. It's that someday we'll have Nigerians, just the way it were. Our grandparents told us stories of people putting their provisions, what they're selling outside on the street and going inside, and passers-by buying and paying without the person who is selling being present. That was the kind of Nigeria that we had then, right? Whereby you could be certain that you could leave your child at your neighbor's house till 10, 12 p.m., 1 a.m., and he or she is safe from being assaulted. We had that kind of a nation. Not anymore right now, right? So we all need to love our nation. So speaking about this love for our nations, speaking about no nation can love you best as compared to, you can't have another nation love your nation for you than you loving your nation the way it ought to be loved, right? There might be, or there might not be a public servant or a figure out there with whom you admire, but we just want to know, we're just curious to know if at all there's anyone out there that you admire. We want to know who he or she is and why that is.
If you give me the latitude, the opportunity to probably deviate a little bit from your classification, I also have a couple of individuals I admire in this direction that you've just mentioned. And I will take in my first line of action, I will take President Olusegun Obasanjo. For the fact that you cannot doubt his good intention for Nigeria. You cannot doubt that he takes bold decisions, even when he thinks that might backfire. He is, in my own view, very detribalized Nigeria, in my own experience for him. Then you take Musa Yar'Adua. He's a very simple human being. Although he didn't last long, so we can't judge what would have happened if he has completed his 2 term. But his simplicity, strikes me as something that we need in Nigeria. Then, in a total deviation from this, the third person I would like to do my cap is Sowore. Sowore, I disagree with a lot of things he says and how he says it, but he has been one Nigeria that has stood for what he believes in. He has been intimidated. He has been, bullied. He has been, called names. He has, I was reading about part of his experience that it's almost been arrested for how many 50 something times now in Nigeria.
I think over 250 something times.
200 something in Nigeria, and at the very early stage where he started is you can say whatever you want to say about him, but you can say that he has been consistent in his advocacy for a better Nigeria. So if you like I said, these are the three political figures that I will look at, and I will say, yeah, I think there's something, one or two things we can learn from them.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kenneth. Two more questions, and then sorry to would have kept you longer than expected. Two more questions, and then we'll bring this to a close. We have, for the first time ever in the history of our beloved Nigeria, we're going to be having what I call a weakened oppositions. Seriously weakened. In fact, many of us can agree that the vote is going to be split in so many ways. We're going to have many people emerging from ADC, which is the political party you come from. We're going to have some emerging from NDC. We're going to have some emerging from whichever PDP faction that INEC decides to publicize. We're going to have some emerging from APC. And when we go down to Anambra Southeast, which is a very interesting state, we're most likely going to have some are emerging from ABGA, a little bit from Labour Party when you go to Abia. When you come back to Anambra, we'll have some from APC, PDP, NDC, and ADC in one state. So, but one thing is certain, we're going to have a weakened oppositions, seriously weakened. You are a member of ADC, right? We don't know how Delta State is going to be split across. We don't know who's going to win the governorship election. If it's going to be ADC, if it's going to be APC, or if PDP are going to make a comeback, we do not know. Or if it's NDC. We don't know who's going to win the 3 senatorial seats there in Delta State, the House of Rep seats. We don't know how the assembly there is going to be split. We do not know. But if you were to, Nigerians and those lovers of Nigerians all around the world are watching us right now, if you were to speak and address Nigerians, what would you tell them about your party that you think they should know, and that might encourage them to tell their friends who lives and resides in Delta State to maybe consider voting for ADC? What would that be? Or what are those?
So if you look at the line of our interview from now, excuse me, I joined the ADC because I believe in their philosophy. They've given the diaspora the platform to operate, and I share that philosophy. That ideology is basically very dear to my heart. Having represented the diaspora for so many years and knowing the potentials of the diaspora, I believe that we can add a lot of value to the political circle. And ADC has been the only party that has given us that platform. And so I would tell them that, if you need a diaspora voting, if you need a diaspora representation, if you need a youth representation, if you need representation with people with disability and women involved in politics, then please, AGC is the party. Again, there's no doubt about we're very happy when we started with the coalition, and then we have very prominent names in that coalition. We felt that eventually the opposition party has arrived where they're going to unseat Bola Tinubu Ahmed from the presidency. Unfortunately, due to own goals or due to personal issues within the coalition, and also I'm not ruling out also external factors, we have a very weakened opposition today, like they pointed out. But that said, I believe that based on the very good analysis you have actually made about the weakened fractionalization of the oppositions across the state, the ADC stand a very, very possible chance of snatching the federal government because of the fact that we have a presidential candidate in the person of Alhaji Abubakar Atiku, who is from the north. And I can tell you one thing for free, the north might seem divided now, but with a single candidate emerging from the north, at the right time, they will all rally around behind him. And we're looking about 19 states, supporting Atiku. No person has emerged as the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria without the three ports, supporting them. I'm talking about the north, the south, and then the east. So to say, supporting the presidency. So far, the West will be fractionalized with Makinde coming out as the president, with Tinubu there as the president. And then, of course, in the east, we have the P2B there. Then we have Donald Duke, and then we have other individuals. While in the northern states that are going to be probably focused on 19 states, they are going to support Atiku. So if you do the mathematics, Atiku will basically likely clear the 19 states in the north, and then take 25% in the south and in the west, and then he becomes the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And so, based on that, I will suggest, I will advocate that, based on this mathematics, that we should be focusing, we should be looking at ADC as president, the next presidential candidate. And if I were most of my political friends in most of the states, I would say they look towards the ADC and say exactly how partner together to make sure we deliver a very strong center and do a coalition within the states where we can be able to support one another.
Thank you, Honorable Connect. Just before the last question, I don't know what your responses are to critics who would say, but President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC political party has governors in in all the northern states, whereas your principal, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar of the ADC, has no governorship. Candidates, so to say, in the northern region. So how is that going to play out? What do you say to your critics?
Well, I will say to my critics, check the last election, 2023, check the candidates, check how many of the candidates that do not have a single governor in the state, and then end up doing very, very well in the state. If they can, if that can, they can put that up in 2023, they can put that up in 2027.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Honorable Connect. The last question we have is more, it's a very personal question, in my opinion. And I think it's a question every Nigerian like yourself who is seeking to helping Nigeria, rescuing Nigerians, should continually ask himself or herself. It's a question that I sometimes always do as well, personally. And we're going to close with that question. And it's a question that you would need to actually respond to it yourself personally. And you could also respond to the question publicly to fellow Nigerians or viewers out there. And the question is it really worth it? Is Nigeria worth dying for? Is the stress, the hassle really worth it? Are Nigerians really worth the effort you're putting in? Are the people of Delta really worth it? Is Delta State really worth having you come to their rescue? That's a question. You're more than welcome to speak to that question. If you don't have a response, it's okay. We'll hear from you, and then we'll give a closing remark, and then we'll call it a day. So over to you, Honorable Connect.
Yes, to be honest with you, there are times I sat down and asked myself that question. I've been to Nigeria this year for the almost the 7th time, and each of these flights cost me over $2,000. And I stay here and I take care of my feeding, my security, and my other issues. And at the end of the day, I sit down in the closet and I ask myself, is it really worth it? And I answer that by saying to myself, through my action, that for the fact that I've remained in that process, for the fact that I'm still involved in this process means that I've answered that for myself, that it's yes, indeed, it's worth it. But in all honesty, I think you were fair enough to say that everybody has to really, ask themselves that question, if it's really worth it. For me, I would say yes, it's worth it for me. And but I acknowledge the fact that everybody must not be politician. Everybody must not, get to the field to do what they think they should do. And so my appeal is that even when you decide to stay in the comfort of your home, do the minimum you can, do the minimal you can, and then see exactly what comes out at the end of the day. But what we are saying, and I think you mentioned that over and over again, we want to see a Nigeria that works for everybody, a Nigeria that we can call our own. You can look at what is happening in South Africa, you can look at what is happening in Europe, and partly what's happening under the from America. It's covered that at the end of the day, east, west, north or south, home, it's home. And if we don't make the home good for us, for our generation, for our children to come, nobody is going to do that. So these are the things we need to take into consideration for answering that question ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Honorable Kenneth.
So much.
We thank you for joining us. We thank you for the time you've sacrificed for us. For those who are just tuning in or who are not aware, Honorable Kenneth is a very, very important figure, political figure there in Delta State. He's hoping to some down the road holding an elective office, whichever sort that would look like, and he's hoping to make a difference. So if you happen to have friends or know of anyone who will live or reside in Delta State, be sure to speak very well of Honorable Kenneth Bandy. Honorable, I don't know if you have any word for us before we let you go real quick. Any final word?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll say thank you for having me. I mean, it's an opportunity every politician dreamed of, to address his people and address the global audience. I appreciate the work your consulting groups are doing. I'm of the very, very strong opinion that the diaspora cannot exist without the American diaspora in terms of human capacity and in terms of intellectual capacity. And that you have demonstrated today. I would beg you to keep doing this good work. A lot of good diasporans out there who are also campaigning, who might be looking forward for such opportunity. I will plead with you to also, reach out such a powerful forum for them to also express themselves and be able to, convince a lot of Nigerians that we need to have diaspora engagement. I think, like I said, you might not be on the ground, but I think you're offering a platform, that is going to probably make a lot of change. And these are the kind of inputs we're begging everybody to get involved with and not sitting down on the chair and criticize everything.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kenneth. We appreciate that. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. As always, this is JE Field Strategy, and we are a non-partisan political consulting firm. We strongly believe that in every nation or wherever nation you come from, we strongly believe that the right people for the job can emerge from whatever political party that they have right there in their respective countries. And that's what we advocate for. So once again, thanks for joining us, and do have a rest evening, or wherever you guys are coming from, have a rest, have the rest of your day to yourself. Bye now, and thank you. Once again, thank you, Honorable Kenneth. All the best to you, sir, in your race, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good night, sir.
Thank you so much.